Last time on D&D, featuring Adrian Silverstrength, the human paladin, Morsus Firebeard, the hill dwarf cleric, Ragnarok, the Asmir warlock, Safrenia, the high elf cleric, and Don Kanan, the half elf ranger. The party listens to Rex Hammer explain the situation that's happening here in the Dwarven Kingdom, and all of them, except for Adrian, who's very wrapped up within listening to Rex's story. This is due to Adrian missing a perception check. Notice that the woman, the female dark elf, the drow, whatever you want to call her, she is technically still breathing. She's just in a state of dying. And they quickly discover that she has an explosive device in her hand, which she triggers, basically collapsing the entire entrance to the Dwarven Kingdom, sending rubble and boulder down. Most of the party, thanks to being able to spot her with the explosive mechanism, are able to avoid most of the damage that comes tumbling down. As the party gathers back together and they pull Rex out from the rubble as well, Rex begins to explain that the situation is very, very dire. He explains that he's got some ore that he can briefly enchant weapons that deal additional damage to elves. He casts a sort of look of my apologies to Safrenia, hoping that doesn't insult her. He explains that the enchantment only lasts for a few hours, but it can make a difference when leading an assault against the Dark Elves. The problem is, during one of their attacks, the Dark Elves, having learned that Rex has this ability to enchant weapons, stole his magic hammer. The plus side, however, is that there is a crazy goblin much further down in the Shadow Vale, the Shadowlands, who's aligned himself, supposedly, with the dwarves against the Dark Elves and the Illithid, and his name is Noron Greenskin. He goes on to explain that Noron supposedly has a cure for the poison that's been injected into the water, which is the same poison that these Dark Elves are using to tip the black oak arrows that are killing the dwarves that get hit with it. However, gathering the components needed is complicated, as Noron phrased it. Rex knows that several dwarves have been sent down to go speak with Noron, but none of them have yet returned. He adds to this that there is also a tribe of Azur, who are dwarf-looking humanoids with bronze skin and fiery hair. They live further down next to where the lava is in the Shadow Vale, and they come from the Plane of Fire. They typically are here to trade with the dwarves, but the attack with the Dark Elves and everything like that has complicated the issue, and the Dark Elves are also attacking the Azur because they know that the Azur are helping the dwarves. That is what Rex says. Rex proceeds to give the party a map of the area known as the Shadow Realm or the Shadow Vale. The party decides that they're going to go looking for this Noron Greenskin to help put an end to the poisoning of the water, which was their mission for coming here. After a few hours of traveling downward, deeper and deeper into the mountain, following the map that they've been given into the Shadow Realm, they come into an area where the mushrooms here are towering, as large as trees, standing some 10 to 15 feet in height, with a base that is anywhere from 5 to 15 feet wide. Many of the mushrooms here, standing anywhere from 5 to 10 feet that are smaller, have this luminous bottom that is either like a neon pink, green, red, blue, purple, yellow, and they shimmer and alter colors, kind of varying as they walk by. The color basically changing based on the tremor that is near it. This unusual form of lighting is something that none of them have ever experienced before. As the party progresses further, continuing to follow the map, they get to a very swampy area where both Morsus and Adrian spot some humanoid-looking fish creatures. Choosing to try to avoid them, they try to kind of stealthily get around. However, Morsus fails the stealth check, making a loud noise and drawing the attention of these creatures known as Koatoa. Adrian has heard of these creatures and knows that these fish-like humanoids were one of the first worshippers of Kraken creatures, which Kraken are these large, enormous, like squid-like creatures that are rumored to exist throughout the oceans. The Koatoa live in caves along the shore typically, able to breathe both air and water effortlessly. They discovered a kraken and began to worship it as one of its gods. As the Koatoa expanded, their gods continued to spread in various forms in the ocean. This created, according to the legend, such creatures as the aboleth. The aboleth is an aquatic creature that can primarily live in the water but can get onto the shore and has telepathic abilities and is a terror to behold. The Koatoa are primitive and their clans are ruled by the eldest priest, who is the one that communes with their chosen gods. Some factions of the Koatoa, who have not found an oceanic creature to worship, often derive a creature and create their own deity, and somehow through their linked consciousness can actually form an astral version of their god or goddess through a ceremony called the dark tide. When the moon is gone from the sky and the tide has receded from the shore, this is when they do their ritual, and how it's actually completed and done and what brings this creature into essence is still unknown. The Koatoa weapons are often geared towards capturing rather than immediately killing, since they would rather capture other humanoids to appease their gods. The party attempts to hide from the approaching Koatoa, who heard the sound but did not actually spot Morsus, but several of the party members are not quick enough to find a good hiding spot, and a fight breaks out between the party and the Koatoa. As the fight is breaking out, several of the Koatoa are slain, and some of them suddenly begin chanting. And Sophrenia, realizing from what Adrian has told them, she casts silence over them to prevent them from potentially summoning some form of deity or god. The party is able to slay these Koatoa scouts, and the party, knowing from what Rex had said that the components for the cure to the poison requires odd ingredients, they decide perhaps Koatoa eyes may be one of them. So the party proceeds to try to cut out Koatoa eyes, and they manage to get a few and put them in a bag. The party eventually gets to an area where they're passing through a small cave, and in here they find several other dead dwarves who, just like the other ones, all have what appear to be black oak arrows in them, and some of them appear to have advanced stage of decay, which probably means the arrows that they were struck with were poisoned with the very poison that they're here to put an end to. Continuing, making their way down the path, crossing over several rivers, skirting around lakes and swamps, they finally arrive at what is marked as Noron's cave, but he's not there, though there is evidence he lives here with bubbling potions, tables, and books scattered everywhere. The party calls for him, and they're not really sure if they should do this, but they hear an unusual roar of a monster, which makes itself known, as well as a goblin riding on the back of it. Flying through the air is what appears to be a large mantis-like creature, and on the back, a goblin dressed in purple robes, calling himself Noron Greenskin, and his mount, which he calls Glider. He flies around the party for a brief moment, observing them, ensuring that neither of them are dark elves or drow or illithid, so probably not an enemy. But he is quite surprised to see that they're not dwarves either. He eventually lands, and Glider, which is a large creature again that looks like a mantis, takes off back into the air. Noron explains that the Glider is actually a cloaker, and it's one that he found that had been an infant and wounded, undoubtedly by the Dark Elves or the Illithid. All the more reason to hate them, he said. And he nurses poor Cloaker back to health with potions, and Glider has ever since then become Noron's best and really only friend. Despite the evil intent of most cloakers, much like Noron, Glider is an exception to the rule. Noron then asks the party why they're looking for him. After all, it is unusual that it's not all dwarves, or not all dark elves, or not all illithid are down here. There's a mixture of races, and Noron's actually quite surprised to see that anyone besides those other three races would be down here. The party explains that Rex had sent them down here because there was a rumor that he could cure the poison that the drow were using. Noron, while a genius and also very evident that he's slightly crazy, spoke unusual voice and explained, "I will need the heart of a troll to regenerate the wounds, the heart of a basilisk to make them strong as stone, 2 eyes of carrion crawlers to see death on which they feed, 5 shrieker caps for the potent toxins that cleanse the poison's base, the tongue of a hokor to taste that which is lethal, 4 Koatoa eyes to summon the power of a god to cleanse the lakes, ash of magi men to crush into powder. The pacify spore of a myconoid. Good luck with that, good people, but gathering the spores only typically generated in defense of being attacked. And finally, the last thing, the beak of an owlbear to consume the concoction which must be created. The party is excited to report that they have at least 3 of the 4 Koatoa eyes that they managed to harvest. They ask Noron where the other things can be found, to which he asks, "How did you find me?" Adrian shows him a map that was given to them by Rex, and Noron immediately begins scribbling corrections all over the map, grumbling how dwarves need to come down here and properly map out these caves. All of these areas are different. Drow have blocked off rivers, they've collapsed caves. This map is very out of date. He does scribble down where to find the beasts, such as trolls. They live in these caves over here to the west. Basilisks dwell in a swamp with glowing gemstones a few hours away. The carrion crawlers could also be found in the same swamp. Shriekers, there's entire colonies of shriekers seen for miles on top of this massive hill. Unfortunately, the hook horrors live near there too. The Magimen, they live further down near the lava. And the myconoid live near the shriekers as well. And the owlbear, well, that kind of just walks around everywhere. Chances are the party can just run into one on pure accident. The party tries to rest in Noron's cave, but his giggling and explosive experiments and the constant talking to himself in this small enclosed cavern make getting rest here virtually impossible. On the way back to the Koatoa, the party decides to search those dead dwarves that they had found in the cavern, and they deduce that these are probably the dwarves that Rex mentioned that were sent down here to find Noron, and they had been killed by the Dark Elves. By the time the party gets back to where the Koatoa were, they realize things have gotten much worse, that those scouts that they had slain and had not yet returned caused the Koatoa to be in a state of emergency, and the party quickly deduced that the Koatoa were doing some kind of ritual. The party does manage to find some Koatoa that were doing patrols around the side, and they manage to ambush them and kill them rather quickly without being noticed, and once again harvesting out the eyes that are required now for Noron's potion to work. On their way back, just as they're passing through the cavern where the dead dwarves were, a black oak arrow strikes next to Adrian, and Adrian shouts to take cover. The party discovers that there are 5 dark elves here that have basically set up a trap. As the party goes out to rush and greet these dark elves who have set up this ambush, the dark elves see a dwarf, and they can't tell the difference between a mountain dwarf and a hill dwarf. And also this dwarf that they see is wearing the symbol of Florenza, which is the goddess of life. This is the enemy of the drow. So they focus their fire on him. Thankfully, the arrows that strike poor Morsus, who is running towards them, those are not poisoned. Adrian uses command to beckon one to his side, and then Dawn uses a net to capture that drow. Adrian then begins dragging the drow back to the cavern for cover while his comrades continue the fight. The last remaining drow and his comrades are captured and the others are killed. However, the dark elf or drow that they had captured and brought back through the net bites down on a poison tablet. But Adrian uses his lay on hands and expends all of its points to keep that dark elf from killing himself. And this is where we stop this week. As a side note, the party gained inspiration for figuring out that Noron was based off of his appearances, actually based off of character. He's dressed in purple and is a goblin with green skin, and he rides a cloaker that he calls a glider. This is all a reference to Marvel's The Green Goblin, Spider-Man's greatest and probably original enemy. The cloaker represents the glider he rode upon, and Noron even calls him Glider. And Noron is basically the first 3 letters of Norman, and the last 3 letters of Osborn. So Norman Osborn is the original Green Goblin. So that's where Noron, Greenskin's first name, comes from. The original Goblin image looks like this. I took it and changed the color of the clothes to make it look like Marvel's Green Goblin costume in the form of D&D. If someone knows who the original artist is, please let me know down in the comments. I would love to give them credit for the original piece.